It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. I'm the president of Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. You can find a link to my work at emailrevealer.com. You can also find a copy of my get a copy of my book, an autographed copy of the book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. All kinds of searches, asset searches and locates and adoption investigations at emailrevealer.com. This show is brought to you by our new sponsor, CartKing.com. That's cart-king.com. Their number is 877-986-7771. And what they do is they build, if you have an idea for a business, you want to go into the shopping mall there with a little coffee kiosk or a flower cart and sell your wares from like in a high trafficked area like the airport or a hospital lobby, CartKing.com is going to put you in business. You tell them what your idea is. They're going to design the cart for you. It could be anything, even one of those carts by the baseball field outdoors, to sell hot dogs and stands from next to the baseball game there. CartKing.com. Go to their website, check it out. Any idea you have, they'll design it for you, they'll build it for you, and they ship it worldwide, anywhere. CartKing.com. Okay. Got a fascinating topic for you here today. Our guest is Dr. Larry O'Hara. And he's from the website, publication here, Notes from the Borderland. And you can find it at borderland.co.uk. Very well done periodical here, this with articles and investigations. Very well researched and with footnotes at the end. I'm very impressed with this work. Dr. O'Hara, are you there?
I am, yes.
Can you thank you so much for coming on the show. Can you tell us about yourself? Who is Dr. Larry O'Hara? And tell us a little bit about Notes from the Borderland.
Let's see. In terms of who I am sort of, late 50s. I've been interested in sort of politics for many years. I come probably from the left of the political spectrum, which is probably to the left of your liberals. I've always been interested in examining kind of fringe movements of different sorts. I've got the title doctor because my PhD was on the far right in Britain, the National Front, which I got about nearly 20 years ago. And I suppose I set up the magazine because I became, a lot of people who are interested in things like the security services, certainly in this country, there's been questions about, who was then spying for the Soviet Union in the Cold War and all that kind of stuff. I was never really very interested in that. What I became interested in is the intervention of the special branch in MI5 in the political process to do with political activists. So my interest in politics, my commitment and technical abilities in research then led me to uncover various things like agents provocateurs and how stories in the media aren't what they seem necessarily. So myself and a few friends decided to set up this magazine called Notes from the Borderland, which deliberately doesn't have a political title as such because we welcome sources from everywhere. And the great advantage, it takes a lot of work to produce a magazine, as we do, but the advantage is that we can look at stories that we're interested in and we can pursue stories over many years. In other words, we don't necessarily just give them up because they aren't fashionable. And we cover a broad range of things. Some of them are quite well known, like say we have looked at the death of Princess Diana, but others of them are things that people either won't cover or they won't cover in the inimitable way, I would say, that we cover them. That's an opening statement, if you like.
Now, Notes from the Borderland, is this a printed magazine that I could have delivered through the mail?
Yeah, it is a printed magazine. There's quite a philosophical question which we will cover, which is that there are many ways in which the internet has been quite good in terms of instant accessibility of information, but I'm always struck by this kind of impermanence of the internet. That at any moment, a website can disappear. And the units of the NSA and GCHQ who were devoted to, disappearing sort of stories and sites. And if you just think about it, from a point of view of an authoritarian regime, if you have your opponents, in whatever country of the world it might be, if they just rely on the internet, if you want to deal with them, you just simply shut down the site. Whereas if you're dealing with a printed publication and there are 2,000 of it printed, then you'd have to get each copy of the publication in order to effectively suppress it. And I suppose I am a bit worried by the interconnectedness of the world in which resilience isn't built in. And we think that we do put a lot of effort into our website, and we do put some things on the website we don't put in the magazine. But I'm quite influenced by that book. I think it was by Alan Carr, The Shallows, on how the internet doesn't necessarily encourage people to follow arguments at length. You're reading something on the internet and then it has a link to something else, or you have a picture of a dancing cat, or a message pings into your email box. So that idea of that, if you've even looked at the website, in order to follow the complex arguments that we put forward, does require concentration, which maybe the internet doesn't necessarily encourage that. So we have a printed magazine and we have the internet, and we believe in having both, philosophically and operationally.
Okay, excellent. Now, and you also have some videos here too on your website as well. Notes from the Borderland.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, a couple of media appearances, and also one case we looked at, the Gareth Williams case, which we might come on to. I just visited a few locations and just did a little bit of filming. So, even though I'm not the most photogenic person out, there's no harm in doing that as well. I
mean, myself as well. I got a face for radio, they say, right? Now, and we're about the same age, too. I'm in my mid-50s. I'm like yourself, in your late 50s. And also, too, I'm from the left. I grew up in New York City. I was with the Yippies, the Youth International Party, which are affiliated with the Black Panthers types, there were leftist groups back in New York City. We had a magazine called Overthrow Magazine, same kind of, printed paper. Sure.
I was in contact with, just before he died, sadly, I don't know if you've ever heard of an obscure American publication called the Portland Free Press. It was run by somebody called Ace Hayes. But that was definitely on our wavelength. But sadly, just after I began to exchange information with him, not as anything sinister about it, I think he just died of natural causes. So that was a bit sad.
I definitely recall the Portland Free Press. I think it's been out of business for a while, right? Or is it still in?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I don't think it continued after he passed away, sadly.
Yeah, Portland's a good hotbed for an old-fashioned leftist as well.
Yeah.
And it still is. So thank God for that. There's a refuge for us. So we can all band together in Portland. So we got you on the show to talk about this nail bombing, this 1999 London nail bombing. So why don't you give us a little background on that?
Well, in 1999, on 3 weekends, there were 3 separate nail bombings carried out. The first one was in Brixton in South London, when quite a few people were injured, but thankfully nobody was killed. That was an area sort of with a lot of Afro-Caribbean people in Brixton. The next weekend, on the opposite side of London, in East London, in Brick Lane, there was another nail bombing, which again, thankfully, injured very few people. But then, sadly, on the third weekend, or on the Friday, on the 30th of April 1999, in Soho in central London, in a bar frequented by gay people and others. A nail bomb went off which killed 3 people, one of them a pregnant woman. Now, the person who was definitely involved, but I just don't think it was just him, somebody called David Copeland, was on the night after, I think 1 a.m. after the last bombing, he was arrested, and he had been involved in neo-Nazi groups, and initially he said it was just him. And I went along to his trial, and at his trial he didn't give evidence, although there was some interesting evidence came out. But the scandal, if you like, was that between the first bombing on the 17th of April, it allegedly took about 12 days for his picture to be processed in such an identifiable way that it was released into the public domain, because the minute it was released into the public domain, then people who knew him recognized him. And it's my contention, and it's backed up by a lot of evidence, that not only there have been various people who kind of put him up to it and sort of trained him and gave him suggestions, that probably when he planted the first bomb, but definitely by the time he planted the third bomb, he was being observed by the security services. In other words, they allowed him to run, as the saying goes. And it's my contention that if he'd have been arrested, certainly before the first one or after the first one, then people wouldn't have died. So then that's where the kind of scandal arises, because there's another kind of, let's say, a parallel case, but there's another cause célèbre that happened 6 years earlier, where a black teenager called Stephen Lawrence was murdered by some white racists in southeast London, and that became such a catalyst for changes in the police, and it still is a big issue now, because they've got some of the people who did it, and there are other people that people suspect may have been involved, and there was police corruption and so on. And everybody wants to talk about the Stephen Lawrence case, but nobody really wants to talk about the, complicity / foreknowledge in the David Copeland case, which I think is sad, and I think it's disgraceful, really.
Yeah, until I was contacted by Graham, who helped produce the show and helped book this guest. I had never heard of the 1999 London bombings.
Not surprising, because if you look at it, it's, maybe the difference with the Stephen Lawrence thing, one thing, is that somebody was captured around about the time of the bombings, and he certainly was involved. I don't necessarily go along with this stuff that he was a mind control experiment or something like that. He was an undoubted neo-Nazi, and what he did fits in with their ideology. It's just that I think there were people who put up to him, and there's even police who were actually tailing him on the day of the last bombing, who phoned the local police station and said in a panic, "We've lost him." I mean, here's a fascinating but a very worrying statistic, just so you can find it. There were quite a few kind of gay bars in London at that time. Now, there were 143 gay bars in London. Of those 143 gay bars, there were only 4 of them were visited before the bombing by police to say, you need to be a bit worried. The Admiral Duncan, the pub that was bombed, plus 2 other pubs on that street and one on another street nearby, were the only ones that were visited. So 4 out of 143 venues were visited, including the one we eventually bombed. If you add to that people on a lesbian and gay police consultative committee, according to a member of the committee, they reported back that they were shown police footage of him being surveilled